Welcome to Neurotypical's Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nick King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox. And together we're here to explore, understand, and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course.
Hello, welcome back to Neurotypical's Don't Juggle Chainsaws with myself, Nick King, and herself, Kate Fox. We often text just before we do a podcast about what we're going to do, and I do mean just before. And Kate's suggestion today was death. So all the trigger warnings in all of the world, because quite frankly, I don't really know where this conversation's going.
Yes,
Just assume all of them.
all the trigger warnings, and also suicide trigger warnings, definitely, which actually is a very sensitive one for neurodivergent people. So yeah, also death.
I've got no doubt there will be some light-hearted moments shortly,
Well,
because quite frankly, I don't do death well, and I will openly admit to not being able to do death well, properly, or anywhere near societal expectations.
see, this
Rubbish at it.
is why this is the conversation we need to have, because this is a very persistent thing for the neurodivergent folk I know. So tell me, so perhaps before I say a bit more about me and death, having an ongoing relationship, I would say it's developing. How? So you're saying you don't do death well. What do you mean? In what way? What do you think? What are your death-related feelings?
Pretty much none. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? I think if anyone who isn't incredibly close to me, no feelings really. Not really. Not if I'm being honest about it. And then even then, if I think about like my grandparents, and that wasn't that recent, who I was incredibly close to, they were both like they both long had their time. They were both very old and ready to drop off the mortal coil. And I didn't really feel sad about it because they were ready. And then I also have this weird thing where, and weirdly, this is something I very much weirdly recommend. So having, for those who don't know, 10-ish years ago now, me and my family were involved in a very significant car crash on the A1 where we got hit from behind at 100 miles an hour, and it was only luck that we lived and nothing more. So having also weirdly almost died, I kind of weirdly recommend it. I think it's very life affirming. It definitely sort of changes your perspective of a lot of things, including death. Because in that moment, it could have just as easily happened to any of us. Yeah, and then there's that Bare Naked Lady song, isn't there? You know, when you're the kind of guy that laughs at a funeral. Not that I'm saying I'm going to funerals and laughing, but I'm also not emotionally there for them either. I don't know.
Okay, so okay,
None of that's the correct response, is it? None of that's the correct
hang
response.
on. Yeah, well, this I would like to dispute this from a number of angles. Not least a Buddhist angle, actually, which I'm going to throw in there. But also a kind of alternative angle. And in fact, interestingly, you misheard me because I did not. I wouldn't ask you what your feelings about something were. I have met you. I did say what were your feelings, but you really kind of answered by sort of saying that your lack of certain feelings is the failing, if you see what I mean. And I'm going to say, well, hang on. It's first of all very rational to think that some old people who die, that this is a thing that happens and it's kind of an expected thing to happen. And that seems this is a perfectly valid response. Absolutely. And in fact, So there's this. I was, in fact, only doing this meditation on Saturday morning at an event at the Watch House. I love how so our local Buddhist centre, it'll advertise things and it'd be like, come along and learn how to enjoy your life or how to have gratitude. And you're like, oh, this will be sort of lovely and positive. And it is, except you go in and the first meditation will be feel gratitude for the fact that you woke up this morning. Because, and then it's very explicit because, you easily might not have done. You don't know if you will tomorrow. Loads of people didn't, and you did. Hooray. Because Buddhism is very much about kind of seeing death as
Part
part
of life.
of life.
That's kind of where I am with it.
But you're doubting this because there are so many social rituals around death, which is one thing, which can be, I'm going to speak maybe for some autistic people, quite comforting to have certain rituals. For many autistic people, confusing and seems a bit pointless, especially if you don't really know why the rituals are there and if you're not kind of navigating them and full of feeling. So that's one thing. It's a horrible situation to be in where you think you're supposed to be feeling a certain thing and you're not feeling the certain thing. Oh, I would love us to have far more appreciation as a society of how people may not be feeling the certain thing. Um, can it, so a couple of, it sounds like I'm more death experienced than you in a way, Nick. It's fair to say.
Maybe. I don't know.
Although,
I have a
although
lot of
you
body count.
That's the thing people should ask, like when they go on a first date, like there's the body count of, the slept with thing. Maybe there should be a death body count because then you can kind of see where you are relatively. However, you have had that flipping heck. The Buddhists had loved that. The fact that you had a near-death experience and it made you realize, gosh, this could have happened anytime. This could have happened, and it made you feel more attached or more alive, more appreciating your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all this is, but then I'm gonna, as it happens, last night at the one of the online writing workshops I run. By the way, these online writing workshops are flipping excellent, and I haven't plugged them quite enough. Monday nights exploring neurodiversity through creative writing and reading. Honestly, it's kind of, we've created this brilliant group. Sign up to my mailing list, katefox.co.uk. Sorry. Oh, that was a bit tasteless. About to talk about death and then got a plug-in for me writing workshops. Anyway, it's relevant. So, one of the writers did a piece, and gosh, it struck me so much. She had basically said to her mum, you don't want to go to this particular funeral. You should in no way feel obliged. And her mum was like, oh, okay. She just needed someone to give her permission to do this thing that she didn't want to do, really, which was go to a funeral. In turn, the writer was then pressured when her mum died and she didn't want to go to the funeral. She didn't want to, actually, she didn't say why, but some of the reasons might be not wanting to be surrounded by and overwhelmed by people, not wanting to have to go through feeling emotions or not feeling emotions in public. All amazingly good reasons to not go to a funeral. But everyone was like, oh, you'll feel better if you go. Well, you should go. Like, your mum would want you to go. Her rational response was, mum's not going to know. Like, she's in fact the only person who's not particularly going to appreciate my presence or not. And actually, I think there was an even bigger reason beyond, though, that her mum was actually not fully attending her own funeral with all her faculties. Otherwise, it will be quite a bad funeral, not to be encouraged. But the fact she'd given permission for her mum to not go to a funeral she didn't want to go to. You could certainly argue her mum, more than anyone, would understand her wish not to go. But that social pressure to do death correctly and to do the feelings correctly, of don't get me wrong, death rituals can be very helpful and we probably need more of them as a society. But what we do not really need is more pressure on neurodivergent people to be a
Do
certain
them.
way.
The
Yeah.
thing is, as well, I feel like quite a lot of them. And I have been to a range of funerals, everything from sort of religious to humanistic to ones that didn't have a body, um, and to ones that weren't funerals, I suppose. And I quite like the idea of gathering people and sharing information and stories and that kind of thing. But yeah, but again, that's not always what it's about, is it?
No, I'm really interested that you said, and this feels very relevant to me, given my experience today and yesterday. You said in order, getting together and sharing information and stories.
Yes.
Yeah. However, one of the interestingly weird death things appears to be. So the reason I suggested this podcast is because someone that I know um, has, I was going to say died because but it has killed themselves. Um, and actually, I think there's a separate podcast on suicide and
Right.
neurodivergence. But so we're not having this podcast now. But how can I put this sensitively? Well, okay, I struggled with a lot of the Facebook posts that began to appear because they said that this person had passed away, and they all said passed away. I it just that as a euphemism I struggle with. So you've got 100 people going has passed away, and no one is going how, when, and anything like that. And it felt like post by post, a giant information void was gathering in a way that I found almost incomprehensible, really. Because then I was like, but what happened? When did it happen? How did it happen? And it felt very surreal that people were posting, but not that. It was like they were following a social script of you go, flipping out, this is terrible. And of course, expressing their feelings, but creating an even bigger information void. Do you know what I mean?
There's often narratives around death, though, isn't there? So, anyone who dies young is obviously classed within tragedy. And I don't know what the age cutoff is now from you like dying young to not dying young. I'm a bit confused by that one. I feel like that one's changed. Um, and then there's, if you happen to have died, like say from drug use or something like that, it's still your death can still be taboo. It can be socially taboo, and then people don't want to talk about it. And
Yes,
then that's also confusing.
yes. And I think there was the taboo around saying that this was a suicide.
Hmm.
So, but what was quick, and I do think so. If I was probably maybe I'm not about to be co-opted as an advisor to people whose autistic children are experiencing death, but if I were, I'd be saying if they would like information, please give them information and not euphemisms, because information would probably be quite helpful in the processing.
I can remember one of the young people at one of my the charities that I used to run, their grandparent had died, and they did want information. And I can remember sitting Googling what temperature it was when you were cremated, because that is the information they wanted in that moment.
Absolutely classic. Of course, there are certain ways in which information, facts help. Partly it's about helping things be real, isn't it? Partly it's because information is, well, it's
Tangible.
information in it.
Yeah.
And I know, but actually, if everyone's busy being euphemistic, then that element can be missed out.
And it's
Um,
confusing as well. I remember when my grandmother died, and Zed at the time was a very little Zed. I think they were 4 to 5-ish. And it happened to be Easter time, and they were learning about Jesus and the resurrection at Easter. And I remember Zed coming to me and saying that my grandparent would be back in a couple of days. And I was like,
yes.
these are not related things.
No,
No,
no.
no.
And I'm realizing, And again, I think this is a separate podcast. We are definitely talking about death and not grief.
Yeah.
Obviously, those things often kind of come together, but not necessarily always. Hopefully, you're enjoying our chat and you can show your support by leaving us a tip, the equivalent of a cuppa, via the PayPal link on our website at neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk. We would really appreciate your help in keeping our podcast going. Can I generalise and say that for a lot of neurodivergent people, a grieving process may, first of all, well, it can look different in many ways to what people think a grieving process should look like or be like. It's often delayed. I mean, in my case, when my dad died, it was delayed about 14 years. Like, these things can take a little while. It can be very intense, like super intense, can become all that there is, can be all consuming. Like, and even if I think I definitely, and I kind of see this in lots of neurodivergent people, someone will die, and to other people, they're like, yeah, but you weren't even that close to that person. Or maybe it's a parasocial death, maybe it's a celebrity death, maybe it's someone, and they are feeling it deeply across all axes, but people outside are going, yeah, you're not supposed to be feeling like that. Conversely, it may be, well, I'm going to speak for me personally. So I am feeling grief about the person who has just suddenly and shockingly died. But I'm experiencing it as like it wouldn't, I have learned I do have to express it, I think, in a certain way, or it's useful to. I'm going to go back to the constipation metaphor. It's as if essentially at the moment there is a poo inside and it's better out than in. I kind of get this objectively. What do I want to go through the process? Not especially. No, not really. But I can feel like in the pit of my stomach at certain points. I'm like, oh, this is, I mean, crying actually good for your body, actually cathartic, actually good to see things through. Um, so what I'm going to do, my cunning plan, I am going to sometimes put myself in situations where I might be more likely to experience the grief. So I am going to go to events and things. Um, and then a lot of the time, I am not. I don't want to be sitting about having to process my emotions all the time. I am actively, like, I'm not feeling emotions now as I'm talking about it. It's very pleasurable to just be thinking them and not feeling them. Does that make, I know it's kind of different because I said to you before we started, yes, I am doing some grief work now. Like in quite a, this is a new task that's come onto my plate, onto my to-do list. I am ready to attempt this task to the best of my ability, having learned over years that probably there's a certain way that it's best for me to do it and not do it.
And I was like, that sounds spoon heavy. Um, and I can get on board with that being spoon heavy. I think I can kind of get on board with it being a process. I still don't know if it's feelings. Constipation isn't a feeling. Can we cover that? Why does
Oh,
constipation show
oh,
up in a, it's a medical condition.
it's a sensation, isn't it? Yeah, but one half, yeah, feelings and sensation. It is, yeah.
Mm.
Can it? Okay, breaking death news. I so it there is definitely a belief that it's better to tell people things in person or on the phone, I think. Um,
I thought you were about to do like a news report there.
Obviously, like breaking
Like
death, someone
death
else has
just in.
died.
Right. So telling
No,
people that somebody's died.
yeah,
Right.
I'm not going to recommend my sister's method around, although actually it worked quite well. So bear in mind, I'd been estranged from my stepdad for many years, whereas my sister was in contact with him. Um, Over Facebook, literally, this was how she broke the news. A message that said, Dad's dead. I mean,
To
it
the
was
point.
brief. It was to the
Okay.
point. Exactly. She certainly wasn't overwhelming me with additional information or feelings here. And in a weird way, I'm like, that's often going to work for a lot of people because flipping heck, it is overwhelming, potentially, to have to perform emotions or have them in public, I want to say. Um,
How did you know you weren't going to be in public when you read that?
well, she did. She did it.
Like
Exactly. Yeah,
check
but
that you're not driving or something
I
at the
know.
time.
Well, I do, to be fair, if I'd been driving, I'm looking at my Facebook messages. I just would have, I'm not going to say
I
it
don't know how long
would be
ago.
right, but that's probably quite a good illustration of why we don't drive and look at our Facebook Messenger messages,
Bad,
isn't
bad example.
it? In case someone has a fairly brutal way. On the other hand, you know the thing of like it's often difficult for autistic people to be given presents because you're expected to have a certain reaction. See also being told about a death, I would say. Um, and I have had certain situations where someone thought it was best to tell me over the phone rather than for me to find out by social media. And I totally appreciate their kindness and consideration, but I would much rather find out by social media. But
What
that's
do you
just me.
even say though, other than all right? Like what's the correct answer to that?
Oh, hang on. Oh, my phone is ringing. That's never happened before. Do you know why? That's because I had my phone on because I knew I was getting the phone call that I knew was going to tell me about the death, actually. They had pre-planned that there was going to be a phone call. Hang on. Turn the phone off. Yeah.
Back in a moment.
Exactly.
There's a level of serendipity about talking about a phone call and then getting the phone call. That's only a little bit spooky.
Although that's not the actually that's a separate phone call. Yeah, it you're so
Yeah,
I'm yes,
what's the correct social response to somebody ringing you and telling you somebody's dead? But what is it?
it's probably not.
All right.
All right. However, if that I'm gonna, that's it's well, this is why there are certain social scripts, aren't there? So like the things that people are supposed to say. Oh, I hate saying them because they're a script, but it's the thing of, for
Sorry
example,
for your loss.
yeah,
Oh,
sorry for your loss. I
oh, but
know,
it feels really insincere.
I know. Again, to some people, it's really helpful to have that script. This is the thing you say, no matter what you're feeling. But then, yeah, the cringe. I can't. Oh no, I can't do.
Mm.
Sorry for your loss. In this instance, actually, what did happen was, so this is very unusual. This wouldn't have happened 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 25 years ago. We actually ended up crying on the phone together. And I was able to, and I was like, oh, that's good. This is preempting because I wouldn't have been crying otherwise. And it was their emotion helped set my emotion off. I was like, useful grief work. This is good. I also strongly suggested to them that maybe the work of telling people by phone was actually very traumatizing for them because it was, and not necessarily something they needed to keep doing. And I wasn't saying it in a, oh, because I'd rather not have known by phone. It wasn't that. It was a, oof, I could feel the emotional labour of that. It is not an emotional labour I'm massively likely to. Oh my God, I can't think of any worse job in the world to ring people to tell them and then deal with their reaction. That's the thing, isn't it? Whatever their reaction is.
Is there now different social protocols now that we're in 2025? How do we do this now? Like how do you do this now? Hang on, I feel like I need a book.
Yeah. That,
Like
well,
I need a to-do list.
a death etiquette guide, because actually their instinct was it's better for people to hear it rather than just read it on Facebook. And it was a kind of horrible shock to suddenly see on Facebook a picture of someone, as far as you know, happily alive with two broken hearts next to their picture, and you're going, what happened? And you trying to piece it together for this is not ideal. I mean, basically, this is yeah. But in an ideal world for your resident neurodivergent human, oh no, that's another thing, isn't it? There's planned deaths, deaths that are expected, so you can prepare, can't you?
Yeah.
Think in advance in all sorts of ways. And then unexpected deaths, which are also a cause of shock and trauma and frozen reactions, or someone might have a, fight, flight, or freeze reaction.
Because I think particularly if I think about my grandparents' death that was expected, like I feel like I'd already done a grief process long before they died because, you know, they
Yeah.
were both pretty much gone by the point where they did. Like there wasn't much left of them as a person. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
Anticipatory grief. But I would much rather have that sort of conversation where you can just say all the things that you're actually thinking rather than try scan the things. So one of the things I said on the call was they were especially a person who shouldn't be dead. And it's definitely worse when some people die than other people because that.
was that.
But I
I
don't
think
think
it's a benefit to having a Nick in your life who's like quite chilled. So I've recently found out one of my good friends is going to be living with cancer until they're not, and they haven't told many people. And they were like, but I am going to tell you because I know you won't be weird around me.
aha, you see, and this is going back to
Because they don't
your
want the sympathy eyes, they don't want the sad look, they don't
no,
want the preemptive grief.
and they
And
don't want to
I
have
can
to,
offer that.
and they don't have to, they're not having to deal with
My
your
feeling.
emotions,
Yeah.
and this is often a massive issue for in any death situation. Essentially, you're going to be plunged into the middle of other people's emotions, which are potentially multiply overwhelming, aren't they? They're sensorily overwhelming, they're emotionally overwhelming, they're like mentally overwhelming. It's a lot.
Yeah, and it is. I remember not long after our car crash, like seeing people like showing people photos because like Mark couldn't walk for quite a long time. So they were like, why? Where is he? And why isn't he? Why is he in a mobility scooter? And I was like, this happened, and like loads of people cried at me. And I was a bit like, okay, I don't know what to do with that.
And that, I suppose that's where script. Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, I know, no, I know.
And then some people did the scripty thing with me, like things like God was with you, or this, that, and the other, and I don't know what to do with any of it, Kate. I
I know.
don't know what to do with it.
And actually, in which case, I would hold no blame if in the absence of knowing what to do with it, your response was mostly to, as far as possible, avoid being in situations where you had to do stuff with it. And
Or
again,
just be like,
yeah,
thanks, and like,
I've,
bye.
I've quite appreciated that you haven't said the things like, oh, I'm sorry for you. Imagine if you'd said to me, I'm sorry for your loss. Because my instant thing would have been, oh, well, I mean, it was mainly other people's loss, actually. And anyway, script, weird. Oh, like, basically then. So okay, not necessarily, oh, well, people, or some people can be excellent people to have around in death situations if you're looking for.
A break. I will be your holiday
While bearing in
from the
mind
feelings.
that some neurodivergent people will themselves be overwhelmed with many feelings and don't know what to do with them, and it'll be a lot.
Yeah.
Like it's either loads or it's a nice restful thing. And scripts and social etiquettes are available, but I think both of us are
But not from
struggling.
us.
No, hang on. I think there's a market here. I think there's a market for
ND death poems, Kate. Go write
Ex-
some.
exactly. And sympathy cards that say sympathy, and then they have like yellow flowers and stuff. We could do more honest cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry about your grandparents, but it was their time.
Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nick King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk or visit our website neurotypicals.jugglechainsaws.co.uk to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.